At my daughter's wedding, the groom shouted, "Stop, she's pregnant with his child." If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more dramatic real-life stories. Your support means everything to me. At my daughter Amara's wedding, just as the priest asked if anyone objected to the union, her fiancé Daniel stood up, pointed at his own best man, and shouted, "Stop everything! She's pregnant with his child!" The entire church fell silent. 200 guests froze in shock. The beautiful cathedral we had spent $15,000 to rent became a theater of horror. My daughter, standing there in her $3,000 wedding gown that I had emptied my savings account to buy, looked like she had been struck by lightning. The best man, James, who I had welcomed into my home for Sunday dinners for the past 5 years, couldn't meet my eyes. In that moment, I knew that the perfect family I had sacrificed everything to build was nothing but an expensive lie. And as I looked at my daughter's tear-streaked face, I realized that this betrayal went deeper than anyone in that church could possibly imagine. I am Esther Okafor, a 46-year-old pediatric nurse from Lagos, Nigeria, now living in Atlanta for the past 20 years. After my husband Thomas died of a heart attack 12 years ago, I raised our only daughter Amara alone, working double shifts to ensure she had everything she needed. Thomas had left us with some money, but medical bills had eaten through most of our savings. Still, I was determined that Amara would have the best life possible. When Amara brought Daniel home 5 years ago, I thought God had finally answered my prayers. He was handsome, well-educated, and from a good Nigerian family that had also immigrated to America. His parents, the Adebayos, were successful business owners with strong ties to our community. Daniel had graduated from Emory University with a business degree and had started his own tech company that was doing well. He spoke respectfully, attended church regularly, and seemed to adore my daughter. James had been Daniel's roommate in college, and they had been inseparable since then. A tall, charming man with an easy smile, James had become like family to us. Every Sunday, he would join us for dinner, praising my jollof rice and telling stories that made Amara laugh so hard she would cry. I had watched him grow from a carefree college boy into a successful architect. He had even designed the house that Daniel and Amara planned to move into after the wedding, a beautiful 4-bedroom home in a gated community that cost $450,000 to $50,000. The engagement had been a dream come true. Daniel had proposed to Amara at her graduation from nursing school, getting down on one knee in front of all her classmates and professors. The diamond ring he placed on her finger cost $8,000. He had proudly told me the price when he asked for my blessing 2 weeks before the proposal. I had cried tears of joy, believing my daughter had found a man who would cherish her as much as her father had cherished me. The wedding planning had consumed the past year of our lives. The Adebayos had insisted on paying for half of the expenses, a gesture that had relieved some of my financial stress. We had chosen a beautiful cathedral, hired the best caterers in Atlanta, and selected a 5-tier cake that cost $2,000. Amara's dress was a masterpiece of ivory satin and lace that made her look like an angel when she tried it on. Just 1 week before the wedding, I had hosted a dinner for Daniel's parents. Mrs. Adebayo had hugged me tightly and said, "Our families are truly blessed to be joined together." Mr. Adebayo had raised a toast to our children's future. Speaking of grandchildren and family holidays, we had laughed, shared stories, and planned the future, completely unaware of the storm that was about to break over our heads. The night before the wedding, Amara had stayed at my house, following the tradition of not seeing the groom before the ceremony. We had stayed up late, talking about her childhood, about Thomas, about the beautiful life that awaited her. "Mom," she had said, holding my hands, "I hope I can be half the woman you are. Thank you for everything you've sacrificed for me." We had cried together, and I had gone to bed feeling that despite all the hardships, I had done something right in this world. My daughter was happy, successful, and about to marry a good man. The morning of the wedding had been a flurry of activity. The hairstylist and makeup artist had arrived at 6 a.m. Amara's bridesmaids, 6 of her closest friends from college and work, had filled the house with laughter and excitement. I had noticed that Amara seemed quieter than usual, but I attributed it to wedding day nerves. When she had trouble eating the breakfast I prepared, I simply kissed her forehead and told her that butterflies in the stomach were normal on such an important day. By noon, we were at the church. Amara looked breathtaking in her wedding dress, her dark skin glowing against the ivory fabric. I had helped her with her veil, my hands trembling slightly as I realized my little girl was truly becoming a woman. "You are the most beautiful bride I have ever seen," I had told her, and she had smiled, though the smile didn't quite reach her eyes. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 p.m. The church had filled with guests, family members who had flown in from Nigeria, friends from both families, colleagues from work. The flower arrangements, which had cost $5,000, filled the air with the scent of roses and lilies. The string quartet played softly as the guests were seated. Everything was perfect, exactly as we had planned. At 1:55 p.m., I had taken my seat in the front row, my heart swelling with pride and joy. The music had changed, signaling the start of the ceremony. The bridesmaids had walked down the aisle in their burgundy dresses, followed by the groomsmen in their black tuxedos. James, as the best man, had looked unusually solemn as he took his place beside where Daniel would stand. Daniel had entered from the side, looking handsome in his tuxedo, though I noticed he seemed tense. The music had swelled for the bride's entrance, and a collective gasp had rippled through the church as Amara appeared at the doors, a vision in white, her arm linked with my brother Chidi's, who was giving her away in place of her father. Everything had seemed so perfect in that moment. And then it all fell apart. The first hint that something was wrong came during the rehearsal dinner 2 nights before the wedding. Daniel had arrived late, his eyes bloodshot as if he hadn't slept. When Amara had leaned in to kiss him, he had turned his face slightly, so her lips landed on his cheek instead of his mouth. I had noticed but dismissed it as pre-wedding stress. Later that evening, I had overheard a heated whispered conversation between Daniel and James in the hallway outside the restaurant's bathroom. "You need to tell her," James had said, his voice urgent. "I can't. Not now." "Everything is arranged," Daniel had replied. "This isn't right, man. You know it isn't. Just drop it. This is my decision to make." They had fallen silent when they noticed me approaching, quickly plastering smiles on their faces. "Everything okay, boys?" I had asked. "All good, Mrs. Okafor," James had replied, but he couldn't meet my eyes. That night I had called Amara, asking if everything was all right between her and Daniel. "Why do you ask, Mom?" She had sounded guarded, just mother's intuition. "You know you can tell me anything, right? Everything's fine. Just wedding jitters." But her voice had lacked conviction. The next morning, I had gone to Amara's apartment to help her with last-minute wedding details. As she went through her checklist, I noticed her hand trembling slightly. "Amara, are you feeling well?" I had asked. "Just tired, Mom. There's been so much to do." But when she went to the bathroom, I noticed her bridal lingerie laid out on the bed, and beside it, a prescription bottle for prenatal vitamins. My heart had skipped a beat. Prenatal vitamins? Was my daughter pregnant? Why hadn't she told me? I had put the bottle back exactly as I'd found it, not wanting to confront her with my discovery. If Amara was pregnant, surely that was happy news. Something to celebrate after the wedding, perhaps. Many couples started families quickly after marriage these days. That afternoon, I had gone to pick up my mother of the bride dress from the final alterations. The seamstress, Mrs. Kim, had smiled as she handed me the garment bag. "Your family must be so excited," she had said, though I heard some interesting gossip yesterday when Daniel's best man came to pick up his tuxedo. "Oh?" I had tried to sound casual. "What kind of gossip?" He was on the phone, sounded upset. Something about telling the truth before it's too late. Probably nothing. Just wedding drama. I had thanked her and left, my mind racing. What truth needed to be told? Was it about Amara's pregnancy? But why would that be a secret that needed revealing? Daniel would be thrilled to be a father, wouldn't he? That evening, I had invited Daniel over for dinner, hoping to gently probe for information. "I can't wait to welcome you officially into the family," I had told him as we ate. "Thank you, Mrs. Okafor. You've always been like a second mother to me." His smile seemed strained. "You know, family is everything to me. Honesty, trust. These are the foundations of a strong family." Daniel had put down his fork, his expression unreadable. Mrs. Okafor, is there something specific you want to ask me? No, I had backtracked, not wanting to create tension so close to the wedding. Just sharing some motherly wisdom. As he was leaving, I had hugged him and whispered, "Whatever is happening, Daniel, remember that love can overcome many obstacles." He had stiffened in my arms before quickly pulling away. "Good night, Mrs. Okafor." The day before the wedding, during the final church rehearsal, I had noticed James watching Amara with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. When she stumbled slightly on the steps to the altar, he had moved forward instinctively to catch her, reaching her before Daniel did. "Careful there," James had said softly, his hand lingering on her arm. Daniel had cleared his throat loudly, and James had dropped his hand as if burned. Later, as we were leaving the church, I had seen Amara and James in what appeared to be a serious conversation near the choir area. They had stopped talking the moment they spotted me, and Amara had quickly walked over, linking her arm through mine. "Ready to go, Mom? Big day tomorrow." Something about her forced cheerfulness had sent a chill down my spine. That night, as Amara slept in her old bedroom at my house, I had noticed her phone lighting up repeatedly with text messages. Unable to contain my concern, I had glanced at the screen when she went to the bathroom. The messages were from James. "We need to talk about tomorrow. Daniel knows. Call me when you can." My hand had flown to my mouth to stifle a gasp. What did Daniel know? And why was James texting my daughter so urgently the night before her wedding? I had gone to bed with a heaviness in my chest, telling myself that whatever was happening, we would face it as a family, that no problem was too big to solve if we faced it together. How naive I had been, how completely unprepared for the reality that was about to shatter our world. Stop everything. She's pregnant with his child. Daniel's words echoed through the cathedral, bouncing off the stained glass windows and marble columns. Time seemed to stand still as every head turned first to Daniel, then to James, and finally to my daughter, whose face had drained of all color. The priest, Father Patrick, who had known our family for years, stood frozen, his prayer book halfway closed. "What is the meaning of this?" he finally managed to ask. Daniel's face was a mask of rage and pain. "Ask them," he shouted, gesturing wildly between Amara and James. "Ask them how long they've been betraying me. Ask them when they were going to tell me that the baby she's carrying isn't mine." Gasps rippled through the congregation. Mrs. Adebayo let out a wail of distress, while her husband sat rigid with shock. My mother, who had flown in from Nigeria for the wedding, gripped my hand so tightly I lost feeling in my fingers. I looked at Amara, silently pleading with her to deny it, to explain that this was all a terrible misunderstanding. But the truth was written in her tears, in the way her hands protectively curved around her still flat stomach, in the anguished glance she cast toward James. James stepped forward, his face pale but determined. "Daniel, man, this isn't how we wanted you to find out. How you wanted me to find out." Daniel's laugh was hollow. "When exactly were you planning to tell me? After the wedding? After the baby was born? Were you going to let me raise another man's child without knowing?" Murmurs rippled through the church. I felt hundreds of eyes on me, on my family, watching our humiliation with a mixture of horror and morbid fascination. I stood up on shaking legs. "Amara," I said, my voice barely audible even to myself. "Is this true?" My daughter looked at me, her beautiful face streaked with tears and makeup. The look in her eyes, shame, guilt, and a desperate plea for understanding, told me everything I needed to know. "Mom, I can explain," she began. But Daniel cut her off. "Explain? What is there to explain? You slept with my best friend. You got pregnant with his child, and you were going to marry me anyway." He was shouting now, his voice bouncing off the church walls. Father Patrick tried to intervene. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion privately." "No," Daniel interrupted. "No more secrets, no more lies. Everyone should know the truth." He turned to address the shocked guests. "The wedding is off. I apologize for the inconvenience, but I will not marry a woman who has betrayed me like this." With that, he tore down the aisle and out of the church, his parents hurrying after him. The guests began to whisper among themselves, the sound growing like a swarm of insects. I stood rooted to the spot, unable to move, to think, to breathe. "This couldn't be happening." "Not to my daughter. Not to our family. Amara sank to her knees on the altar steps, her white dress pooling around her like fallen clouds. James rushed to her side, putting an arm around her shoulders, and that simple gesture confirmed everything. My brother Chidi appeared at my side. "Esther, we need to get everyone out of here," he whispered urgently. I nodded mechanically. Chidi turned to address the guests. "Please, everyone, we ask for your understanding and privacy during this difficult time. The ceremony will not be proceeding today." The guests began to file out, their faces a mixture of sympathy and scandalized excitement. I knew that by evening the story would be all over our community. The shame would be unbearable. When the church was finally empty except for our immediate family, Amara's bridesmaids and James, I found my voice. "Everyone except Amara and James, please leave," I said quietly. "Esther, perhaps I should stay," my brother began. "No. I need to speak with my daughter and him. Alone." Once everyone else had reluctantly departed, I walked slowly to where Amara and James stood. My daughter looked up at me, her face a mask of misery. "How could you?" I whispered, the words scraping my throat like broken glass. "How could you do this to Daniel? To his family? To me?" "Mom, I'm so sorry," Amara sobbed. "We never meant for this to happen." "Never meant for what to happen? To fall in love with your fiancé's best friend? To get pregnant by him? Or to nearly marry a man while carrying another man's child?" My voice rose with each question. James stepped forward. "Mrs. Okafor, the blame is mine. I should have—" "Don't," I cut him off, holding up a hand. "Don't you dare speak to me right now." I turned back to my daughter. "How far along are you?" 3 months, she whispered. 3 months. She had known she was pregnant for 3 months and had continued with the wedding plans. Had continued to accept money from me, from Daniel's family, all while living this lie. "When were you planning to tell the truth? Were you ever going to tell the truth?" Amara looked down at her hands. "We were going to tell Daniel after he got back from his business trip last month. But then his grandmother died, and it never seemed like the right time." The right time? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The right time would have been the moment you realized you were in love with James. The right time would have been before you spent $50,000 on a wedding you knew was a lie. "I was scared, Mom," Amara whispered. "I didn't know what to do." "How did Daniel find out?" I demanded. James answered, his voice low. "He saw texts between us on Amara's phone this morning. He confronted me before the ceremony, but I thought he had agreed to talk about it after the wedding. I never imagined he would do this." I laughed bitterly. "You never imagined he would publicly reveal that his fiancée and best friend had betrayed him? What did you expect him to do? Smile and pretend everything was fine? Mom, please." Amara reached for my hand, but I stepped back. "We need to figure out what to do now." "What to do now?" I echoed. "Now we deal with the consequences of your actions. We apologize to everyone who witnessed this disaster. We return the gifts. We try to get deposits back from vendors. We explain to our family why my only daughter's wedding ended before it began." The enormity of the situation crashed down on me, and I felt my knees weaken. "I need to sit down." I sank into a pew, suddenly feeling every one of my 46 years. Everything I had worked for, all the sacrifices I had made to give Amara a good life, to maintain our reputation in the community, it was all unraveling before my eyes. "Mom, I know you're disappointed in me," Amara said, sitting beside me. "But I love James. I've been in love with him for a long time. I didn't want to hurt Daniel. And I didn't want to disappoint you. So instead, you lied to everyone," I said flatly. "And now, the hurt is 100 times worse." "Mrs. Okafor," James said carefully, "I know this isn't how any of us wanted things to happen, but I want you to know that I love your daughter. I will take care of her and the baby." I looked at him. This man who had sat at my dinner table countless times, who had called me Mama Esther and brought me flowers on Mother's Day. "If you loved her, truly loved her, you would have done the right thing months ago." James looked away, unable to meet my gaze. Father Patrick returned, his face grave. "The church is empty now," he said gently. "But you can't stay here. There are other services scheduled for today. Of course. Life moved on, even as ours fell apart." I nodded and stood up. "We're leaving," Amara, get your things. As we walked out of the church, Amara still in her wedding dress, James carrying her train and me leading the way, I caught sight of the wedding car, decorated with ribbons and flowers, waiting uselessly in front of the church. The caterers would be at the reception venue now, laying out food for 200 guests who would never arrive. The 5-tier cake would sit uncut. The DJ would be setting up his equipment for a first dance that would never happen. I'll drive you both home, James offered quietly. No, I said firmly. You've done enough. My brother will take us. I called Chidi, who was waiting in the parking lot with my mother. His face was grim as I explained the situation. My mother began to cry, old-world tears of shame and disappointment. What will people say? She lamented in Igbo. What will everyone think of our family now? Get in the car, Mama, I said tiredly. We'll figure everything out at home. As Chidi drove us away from the church, I looked back to see James standing alone on the steps, watching us leave. In that moment, I felt nothing but cold anger toward him, toward my daughter, toward the situation they had created. But beneath the anger was something else, a dawning realization that this was just the beginning of a storm that would test our family in ways I couldn't yet imagine, that the worst was still to come. The days following the wedding disaster passed in a blur of phone calls, tears, and uncomfortable conversations. I moved through them like a sleepwalker, operating on autopilot as I dealt with the practical aspects of a canceled wedding. First, there were the vendors to contact. The caterer reluctantly agreed to refund half our deposit of $5,000, though the food had already been prepared. The photographer kept the $1,000 deposit but canceled the remaining balance. The venue, a beautiful garden estate we had booked for the reception, kept the entire $8,000 deposit, citing their 30-day cancellation policy. Then, there were the gifts to return. Some guests had sent them to my house in advance, beautifully wrapped packages that now sat in my living room like painful reminders of what should have been. I enlisted my niece to help me pack them up, write apology notes, and ship them back. The hardest call was to Daniel's parents. Mrs. Adebayo answered the phone, her voice cold and distant. Esther, I don't think there's anything to discuss, she said when I tried to apologize. Stella, please. I had no idea about any of this. I'm as shocked and hurt as you are. Are you? Your daughter has humiliated my son in front of everyone we know. Our family name is being dragged through the mud because of her actions. I understand your anger. No, you don't, she interrupted. Do you know what they're saying in the community? That Daniel wasn't man enough to satisfy your daughter. So she turned to his friend. That my son is a fool who couldn't see what was happening under his own nose. Her words cut deep, not just because of their cruelty, but because I knew similar things were probably being said about Amara. About me. I'm sorry, I said again, feeling inadequate. If there's anything I can do, there's nothing you can do, she said firmly. Please don't call us again. Our families have nothing more to say to each other. The line went dead, and I sat at my kitchen table, the phone heavy in my hand. Another relationship destroyed by my daughter's actions. Amara had moved back into my house temporarily, sleeping in her childhood bedroom. James came by daily, sitting awkwardly in our living room as they tried to plan their future. I was civil but distant, still unable to forgive either of them for the pain they had caused. One afternoon, as I was sorting through the wedding photos that had been taken before the ceremony, pictures of Amara getting ready, of me helping her with her veil, all worthless now, I heard James's voice from the living room. We need to talk to your mom about moving in together, he was saying. The baby will be here in 6 months. We should be living together by then. I know, Amara sighed, but she's still so angry. I don't think she's ready to hear our plans yet. She's going to have to accept it eventually. We're a family now, a family. The word stung. They had created this family through betrayal and lies, and now they expected me to embrace it? I set down the photos and walked into the living room. James and Amara fell silent, looking up at me guiltily. If you have something to discuss with me, I said coolly, you can do it directly. James straightened his shoulders. Mrs. Okafor, Amara and I have been talking. We think it makes sense for her to move in with me soon. I have a 3-bedroom apartment, plenty of space for us and the baby. I see. I sat down across from them. And what about your work, Amara? Will you continue at the hospital? For now, she said, not meeting my eyes. I'll take maternity leave when the baby comes, then see about part-time hours. I nodded, processing this information. And the wedding? Are you planning another one? They exchanged glances. We haven't gotten that far yet, James said cautiously. Right now we're focusing on the baby. Of course. My voice was neutral, betraying none of the turmoil I felt inside. And what about Daniel? The question hung in the air like a blade. Neither of them seemed eager to answer. What about him? Amara finally asked. Have either of you spoken to him since the incident? Have you apologized? Explained yourselves? James shifted uncomfortably. I tried calling him several times. He won't answer. Can you blame him? I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. Mom, we know we handled everything badly, Amara said, her hand unconsciously moving to her stomach, where a slight bump was beginning to show. But we can't change the past. We have to move forward now. Moving forward is fine, I said, but not without acknowledging the damage you've caused. Not without making amends where possible. And how exactly are we supposed to do that? Amara's voice rose slightly. Daniel won't speak to us. His family has cut all ties. What would you have us do? I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, for the first time since the wedding day. Her eyes were shadowed with fatigue, her posture defensive. She was carrying not just a child, but a burden of guilt and public shame. Despite my anger, I felt a flicker of maternal concern. I don't know, I admitted, but running away from the consequences isn't the answer. Trust me on that. Later that evening, after James had left, I found Amara sitting on the back porch, staring out at the garden her father had planted years ago. I sat beside her, offering a cup of ginger tea, her favorite since childhood. Thank you, she said, accepting it gratefully. We sat in silence for a while, watching the fireflies begin to appear in the gathering dusk. When did it start? I finally asked. You and James. Amara took a deep breath. About a year ago. Daniel was away on a business trip to California. He was gone for almost a month. James came over to help me with some plumbing issues. The sink was leaking, and he stayed for dinner to thank him. I remembered that month. Remembered how often James had been at Amara's apartment, how she had mentioned his name more frequently in our conversations. But I had thought nothing of it then. Why would I? He was Daniel's best friend, practically family. One thing led to another, Amara continued, her voice soft. We both felt terrible afterward. We agreed it was a mistake, that it would never happen again. But it did happen again, I said. Not a question, but a statement. She nodded. We tried to stay away from each other. I truly did love Daniel, Mom. I thought I could forget about James, that the feelings would fade. But they didn't. So you continued seeing James behind Daniel's back, while planning your wedding to another man? It wasn't like that, Amara protested. After that first time, we didn't be together again until months later. But we talked, texted. The feelings grew stronger. And the baby. Amara's hand went to her stomach again, a protective gesture. That happened 3 months ago. Daniel was having doubts about the wedding. He said he needed space to think. We were on a break, I guess you could say. I was upset, confused. James came over to comfort me. And you slept with him. She flinched at my blunt words but nodded. When I found out I was pregnant, I panicked. Daniel had decided he wanted to go through with the wedding after all. He was so excited, making all these plans. I didn't know how to tell him the truth. So you said nothing. You let him believe everything was fine. Let him spend thousands of dollars on a wedding. Let his family welcome you as a daughter. My voice shook with renewed anger. I was going to tell him, Amara insisted, tears filling her eyes. James and I both wanted to tell him. But then his grandmother died, and he was so devastated. It never seemed like the right moment to break his heart all over again. And what about the morning of the wedding? How did he find out then? Amara wiped away a tear. He borrowed my phone to call the florist. His was dead. A text came in from James while he had it. Something about our baby. Daniel read our conversation history and figured it all out. I closed my eyes, imagining the scene. Daniel, already nervous on his wedding day, discovering through careless text messages that his fiancée was carrying his best friend's child. No wonder he had chosen to expose them publicly. The hurt must have been unbearable. Amara, I said quietly, do you understand the magnitude of what you've done? The lives you've affected? Of course I do, she exclaimed. I live with the guilt every day. I see it in your eyes every time you look at me. I hear it in the whispers when I go to the grocery store. Everyone knows. Everyone is judging me, not just you, I reminded her. Our entire family, your cousins, your aunts and uncles, your grandmother, who came all the way from Nigeria to see you married, only to witness your disgrace. I know, Mom. Amara's voice was small. I'm sorry I've disappointed you. I'm sorry for the embarrassment I've caused. But I can't change what happened. All I can do is try to make the best of the situation now. I looked at my daughter, my only child, the one I had sacrificed everything for, and felt a complicated mixture of love, disappointment, and worry for her future. You're right that you can't change the past, I said finally, but how you handle the aftermath matters. Amara, it matters a great deal. She nodded, and we lapsed into silence again, each lost in our own thoughts as darkness fell over the garden. The next morning, I woke early and drove to the small cafe where I often met my friend Nkechi for breakfast. A fellow Nigerian immigrant, Nkechi had been my closest friend for 15 years. If anyone would give me honest advice, it would be her. Esther, she greeted me, her face full of sympathy. How are you holding up? As well as can be expected, I replied, settling into the booth across from her. After we ordered, tea for me, coffee for her, Nkechi leaned forward. People are talking, you know. I'm aware. My voice was resigned. What are they saying? Nkechi hesitated, then decided on honesty. The usual cruelty. That Amara has always been wild, that you should have raised her with a firmer hand, that James and Daniel were both seeing other women on the side, that the baby might not even be James's. I flinched at each rumor, each more hurtful than the last. None of that is true. I know that, Nkechi assured me. But you know how our community is. They need someone to blame, and right now, that someone is Amara. And by extension, you. I sipped my tea, trying to maintain my composure in public. Will it ever die down? Eventually, Nkechi said pragmatically. But not soon. This is the biggest scandal we've had since Pastor Obi ran off with the choir director's wife. Despite everything, I couldn't help but smile slightly at the memory of that particular drama. What should I do, Nkechi? I'm so angry at Amara and James, but they're having a baby, my grandchild. I can't just cut them out of my life. Nkechi considered this. No, you can't. But you don't have to pretend what they did was acceptable either. They need to earn your forgiveness, Esther. And they need to make amends to Daniel and his family, whether or not those amends are accepted. That's what I told them, but I'm not sure they really understand the harm they've caused. Then make them understand, Nkechi said firmly, before you can move forward as a family. Her words stayed with me as I drove to work later that morning. I had taken a week off after the wedding fiasco, but had insisted on returning to my job at the pediatric clinic. Work had always been my sanctuary, the place where I could focus on something other than my own problems. The children's innocent faces and immediate needs were a welcome distraction from the chaos of my personal life. But as I walked into the clinic, I immediately sensed a difference in how my colleagues looked at me. Conversations stopped when I entered the break room. The receptionist, who usually greeted me warmly, now gave me a tight smile and quickly looked away. Dr. Patel, the clinic director, called me into his office before my first patient. Esther, he said gently, I heard about what happened at Amara's wedding. I'm so sorry. Thank you, I replied, keeping my voice steady. But I'd prefer not to discuss it at work if that's all right. Of course. He nodded quickly. I just wanted you to know that if you need more time off, I don't, I interrupted. Work is the best thing for me right now. Dr. Patel studied me for a moment, then nodded. Very well, but my door is always open if you need to talk. The day passed in a blur of runny noses, ear infections, and vaccination appointments. I threw myself into the work, grateful for each child who knew nothing of my family drama, who smiled at me without judgment or pity. During my lunch break, I checked my phone and found 3 missed calls from Amara. I called her back immediately, worried something might be wrong with the baby. Mom, she said when she answered, her voice tight with emotion. I just got a letter from the nursing board. Someone filed a complaint against me for moral turpitude. What? I felt a surge of protective anger. Who would do such a thing? I don't know, she said, sounding close to tears. The complaint is anonymous. They're launching an investigation that could affect my nursing license. I gripped the phone tighter. This is ridiculous. What you did was wrong, yes, but it has nothing to do with your ability as a nurse. That's what James said. He thinks it might be Daniel or someone in his family trying to hurt me professionally. The thought had occurred to me too, though I didn't want to believe Daniel would stoop so low. Have you spoken with a lawyer? Not yet. James is looking into it. She paused. Mom, I'm scared. If I lose my license, how will I support the baby? That won't happen, I said firmly, though I had no way of knowing if that was true. We'll figure this out, Amara. After hanging up, I sat in the staff break room, my lunch forgotten as I pondered this new complication. The scandal was no longer just personal. Now it threatened my daughter's career, her ability to provide for her child. The stakes had suddenly become much higher. That evening, I drove to Daniel's apartment building. I hadn't planned to confront him, but after hearing about the complaint against Amara, I needed to know if he was behind it. It was a long shot that he would even speak to me, but I had to try. I knocked on his door, heart pounding. After a long moment, it opened, and Daniel stood there, looking nothing like the polished, confident man who had nearly become my son-in-law. His eyes were bloodshot, his clothes rumpled, his face unshaven. Mrs. Okafor, he said flatly. What are you doing here? May I come in, Daniel? I think we need to talk. He hesitated, then stepped aside wordlessly. The apartment was a mess. Takeout containers piled on the coffee table, clothes strewn about, an empty liquor bottle on the kitchen counter. My heart ached for him. Whatever Amara and James had done, Daniel was clearly suffering too. I won't waste your time, I said, standing awkwardly in the living room. Someone filed a complaint against Amara with the nursing board. I need to know if it was you. Daniel looked genuinely surprised. A complaint? No, why would I do that? To hurt her, perhaps. For revenge. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. I don't want revenge, Mrs. Okafor. I just want to forget the whole thing ever happened. I studied his face and believed him. If not you, then who? Could be anyone, he said with a bitter laugh. The story is all over town. Half the Nigerian community was at that wedding. Anyone who thinks Amara deserves punishment could have done it. I sank onto the edge of his sofa. This is a nightmare that keeps getting worse. Daniel went to the kitchen and returned with 2 glasses of water, handing one to me. A small gesture of civility that moved me deeply. I'm sorry, Daniel, I said, looking into his tired eyes. For what it's worth, I had no idea what was happening. If I had known, what? You would have told me? Stopped the wedding sooner? He shrugged. It doesn't matter now. It's done. Have you spoken with James at all? His face hardened. No, and I don't intend to. Some betrayals can't be forgiven, Mrs. Okafor. I understand. And I did. The pain of betrayal wasn't something that could be easily overcome, if at all. How is she? He asked suddenly, surprising me. Amara, I mean. The question caught me off guard. She's managing, worried about the investigation, about the future. Daniel nodded slowly. I never wished her professional harm. Whatever you may think of me now, I did love her. I know you did. I hesitated, then added, the baby, it's definitely not yours. A flash of pain crossed his face. No, we hadn't been intimate for months before the wedding. That should have been a red flag, I suppose. This was news to me. I had assumed their relationship was normal in every way. Why not? She always had excuses. Tired from work. Not feeling well. I thought it was just stress from the wedding planning. He gave a hollow laugh. Now I know the real reason. She was sleeping with my best friend instead. The raw hurt in his voice made me wince. I should go. Thank you for seeing me, Daniel. As I stood to leave, he said, Tell Amara. Tell her I didn't file the complaint. And I won't testify against her if they contact me. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. Thank you. I'll tell her. As I drove home, I pondered all I had learned. If Daniel wasn't behind the complaint, Who was? And what else might this person do to hurt my daughter? The next day, I visited my brother Chidi at his accounting firm during lunch. As the family elder now that our parents were gone, our mother had returned to Nigeria shortly after the wedding disaster, too ashamed to stay. Chidi had significant influence in our community. "Sister," he greeted me, rising from behind his desk. "This is a surprise." "I need your help, Chidi," I said, getting straight to the point. "Someone filed a complaint against Amara with the nursing board. I need to find out who." Chidi's expression grew serious. "That's troubling. Professional retaliation goes beyond social consequences." "Exactly. This could affect her ability to care for her child." My brother leaned back in his chair, thinking. "I'll make some discreet inquiries. Our community is small. Someone will know something." "Thank you," I said, relieved to have an ally. "There's something else. I visited Daniel yesterday." Chidi raised his eyebrows. "How is he?" "Not good. But he's not behind the complaint." I paused. He told me something interesting, though. He and Amara hadn't been intimate for months before the wedding. "Ah." Chidi nodded as if this confirmed something he already suspected. That explains why he was so certain the child wasn't his, even before she confirmed it. Yes, but it raises questions. If their relationship was already troubled, why continue with the wedding? Why didn't Amara simply break things off with Daniel when she realized her feelings for James? Pride, perhaps, Chidi suggested, or fear of scandal. You know how important appearances are in our community. But surely a broken engagement would have been less scandalous than what actually happened. Chidi shrugged. People don't always make rational decisions, especially when emotions are involved. He studied me for a moment. "What are you really asking, Esther? Do you think there's more to the story?" I hesitated. "I don't know, but I feel like I'm missing something. Like there are pieces that don't quite fit together." "Well, I'll see what I can find out about the complaint. And if I hear anything else that might be useful, I'll let you know." As I was leaving his office, Chidi called after me. "Esther, be careful. Digging into this might reveal things you'd rather not know." His warning stayed with me as I continued my investigation over the next few days. I spoke with several of Amara's bridesmaids, trying to gauge if any of them had noticed tension between her and Daniel before the wedding, or signs of her relationship with James. Zara, Amara's closest friend from nursing school, was the most forthcoming. "I knew something was wrong," she admitted, as we sat in a quiet corner of a cafe. Amara was different in the months before the wedding. Distracted. Sometimes she'd get texts and her whole face would light up. But if I asked who they were from, she'd say, "Just Daniel," in a way that made me suspicious. "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked, trying to keep accusation out of my voice. Zara looked uncomfortable. "I did, actually. About 2 months before the wedding, I asked her directly if she was having doubts about marrying Daniel. She burst into tears and confessed she had feelings for James, but swore nothing physical had happened between them." "And you believed her?" "At the time, yes. She said she was committed to Daniel, that the feelings for James were just a passing infatuation. She seemed so sincere that I thought she was just experiencing cold feet." "When did you find out about the pregnancy?" Zara's eyes widened. "I didn't. Not until the wedding day when Daniel announced it. Amara never told me. That struck me as odd. Zara and Amara had been inseparable for years. If Amara had confided about her feelings for James, why not about the pregnancy? "Did you notice anything strange between James and Daniel before the wedding?" "Any tension?" Zara thought for a moment. "Now that you mention it, at the bachelor party, I was there for part of it, just the dinner before the guys went out. James seemed very uncomfortable. He barely spoke to Daniel all night and left early, claiming he had work the next day. These puzzle pieces didn't create a complete picture, but they added to my growing suspicion that there was more to the story than a simple love triangle. When I returned home that evening, I found James's car in my driveway. Unusual, since Amara had told me she was working a late shift at the hospital. I entered cautiously, hearing voices from the kitchen. "We have to tell her," James was saying, his voice urgent. "She deserves to know everything." "It will only make things worse," Amara replied. "Mom's barely speaking to us as it is. But if she finds out from someone else..." They fell silent as I stepped into the kitchen doorway. Find out what from someone else? I asked quietly. Amara and James exchanged alarmed glances. My daughter looked pale, her hand protectively covering her small baby bump. Mom, she began, her voice shaking slightly. We were just discussing some complications. What kind of complications? James straightened his shoulders, meeting my gaze directly. Mrs. Okafor, there's something we haven't told you about the situation with Daniel. Something that might help explain why things happened the way they did. Amara shot him a warning look, but he continued. Daniel wasn't the person you thought he was. He wasn't the person any of us thought he was. I crossed my arms, skeptical. Meaning what exactly? James looked to Amara, who finally nodded, resignation on her face. About 8 months ago, James began, I discovered that Daniel was leading a double life. He had another woman, a serious girlfriend in California. He'd been seeing her for years, long before he met Amara. I stared at him in disbelief. That's absurd. Daniel adored Amara. They were together for 5 years. Yes, while he maintained his relationship with Jessica in San Francisco. That's why he traveled to California so often, not just for business. This is convenient, isn't it? I said coldly, vilifying Daniel now, after what you two did to him. It's the truth, Mom, Amara said quietly. I found out 5 months ago. Daniel left his laptop open at my apartment, and an email notification popped up from Jessica. It was intimate, unmistakable. When I confronted him, he admitted everything. If this is true, why didn't you break up with him then? Why continue with the wedding plans? Amara looked down at her hands. He begged for another chance. Said he would end things with Jessica, that he truly loved me. And I believed him, or wanted to believe him, but then I found out he was still seeing her. That's when we took a break. And you turned to James for comfort. I finished for her. Yes, James admitted. But it wasn't just comfort, Mrs. Okafor. I've had feelings for Amara for years, almost since the day we met. I never acted on them because she was with Daniel, and he was my best friend. But when I found out how he had betrayed her, I sank into a kitchen chair, trying to process this new information. So you're saying that before you betrayed Daniel, he had already betrayed Amara? They both nodded. Why didn't you tell me this before? Why keep it secret? Because it doesn't excuse what we did, Amara said softly. We should have handled it differently. I should have broken things off with Daniel completely before starting anything with James. Instead, I tried to keep everyone happy, and ended up hurting everyone instead. There's more, James said, hesitation in his voice. The complaint against Amara with the nursing board, we think it might be Jessica. Daniel's other woman? Why would she target Amara? Because Daniel told her he ended their relationship because of the wedding. That Amara had pressured him into marriage. When the wedding fell apart so publicly, Jessica would have realized he lied to her too. She might blame Amara for all of it. It was a plausible theory, one that hadn't occurred to me. If this Jessica truly existed, if she felt wronged by both Daniel and Amara, she might well seek revenge. Do you have any proof of this other relationship? Any way to verify your story? James pulled out his phone. I have screenshots of some of their conversations. Daniel shared them with me last year when he was trying to decide which woman to choose. He handed me the phone, open to a text conversation. The messages were explicit, leaving no doubt about the intimate nature of Daniel's relationship with someone named Jessica. There were references to their anniversary, plans for her to visit Atlanta, mentions of a future together. The dates on the messages corresponded with times Daniel had supposedly been on business trips. I felt sick as I scrolled through them. If these were genuine, and I had no reason to think James would have created fake messages a year ago, then Daniel had been living a lie throughout his relationship with Amara. The man I had welcomed into my home, the man I had thought would make my daughter happy, had been deceiving all of us. Does anyone else know about this? Daniel's parents? His other friends? I don't think so, James said. Daniel was very careful. The only reason I knew was because he needed someone to cover for him sometimes. I didn't like it, but he was my oldest friend. I made excuses for his behavior. Until you fell in love with his fiancée, I pointed out sharply. James had the grace to look ashamed. Yes, I know how it looks, Mrs. Okafor, but please believe me when I say I never intended for any of this to happen. I handed the phone back to him, my mind racing. If what they were saying was true, the situation was far more complicated than I had initially believed. Not that it excused Amara and James's deception, but it certainly cast Daniel in a different light. I need time to process this, I said finally, and I need proof beyond screenshots that could be manipulated. If Daniel was truly living this double life, there must be more evidence. We'll find it, James promised, whatever you need to believe us. I looked at my daughter, noting the dark circles under her eyes, the way her shoulders hunched forward as if bearing an invisible weight. Whatever mistakes she had made, she was still my child, and she was carrying my grandchild. Amara, I said softly, why didn't you tell me about Daniel's infidelity when you discovered it? I could have helped you through it, supported your decision to end the relationship. Tears filled her eyes. I was ashamed, Mom. You were so happy about the wedding, about Daniel becoming part of our family. I didn't want to disappoint you. So instead, you continued with a relationship you knew was broken? You allowed me to spend thousands of dollars on a wedding that shouldn't have happened? I thought I could fix it, she whispered. I thought if I just tried harder, if I was better, Daniel would truly commit to me. It was only when I found out I was pregnant with James's baby that I realized how foolish I'd been. The pain in her voice was genuine, and despite my lingering anger, I felt my heart soften slightly. Oh, Amara, when will you learn that you can always come to me with the truth no matter how difficult? She reached across the table, tentatively taking my hand. I'm trying to be honest now, Mom, even though it's too late to undo the damage. I squeezed her hand, not quite ready to forgive, but taking a small step in that direction. It's never too late for the truth, but there will be consequences that all of you must face, Daniel included, if what you're saying about this, Jessica, is true. As James and Amara shared more details about Daniel's double life, I listened with growing dismay. The picture they painted was of a charming, manipulative man who had strung along two women for years, making each believe they were his priority. If true, it meant I had misjudged Daniel completely, that beneath his polished exterior was someone capable of sustained, calculated deception. But I still needed proof beyond their words, and I was determined to find it. Over the next week, I became a detective investigating my own daughter's broken engagement. It wasn't a role I had ever imagined for myself, but I needed answers, not just for my own peace of mind, but to help navigate the ongoing fallout from the wedding disaster. My first step was to verify the existence of Jessica, Daniel's alleged girlfriend in California. Using the phone number from James's screenshots, I conducted an internet search that led me to a Jessica Chen, a marketing executive in San Francisco. Her LinkedIn profile showed she worked for the same company Daniel often consulted with during his California trips, a connection that lent credibility to Amara and James's story. I debated contacting her directly, but decided against it until I had more information. If she had indeed filed the complaint against Amara, approaching her might only make the situation worse. Instead, I reached out to Daniel's former roommate from college, a man named Michael who had attended the wedding, or at least the disastrous beginning of it. I invited him for coffee, claiming I wanted to return some items Daniel had left at my house. Mrs. Okafor, he greeted me, clearly uncomfortable. This is unexpected. Thank you for meeting me, Michael, I said, sliding a small box across the table. It contained a tie and cufflinks Daniel had indeed left behind. I wanted to give these back to Daniel, but I'm not sure he'd want to see me. Probably not, Michael agreed, then winced at his own bluntness. Sorry, it's just, the situation is pretty awful for everyone involved. Yes, it is. I paused, choosing my next words carefully. Michael, you've known Daniel longer than almost anyone. Did you ever suspect? Was there any indication that he wasn't fully committed to Amara? Michael shifted in his seat, avoiding my gaze. Mrs. Okafor, I'm not sure I should be discussing Daniel's personal life with you. I understand your loyalty, I said, but I'm trying to make sense of what happened to my daughter. I thought Daniel was one person, and now I'm hearing things that suggest he was someone else entirely. What kind of things? Michael asked cautiously. That he was involved with another woman throughout his relationship with Amara, a woman named Jessica in California. Michael's face gave him away, a flash of recognition, quickly suppressed. I don't know anything about that. Your expression says otherwise, I pressed gently. Michael, I'm not looking to cause more pain or drama. I just want the truth. He sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair. Look, I was Daniel's roommate for 4 years in college. I've known him for over a decade. He's not a bad person, but he's complicated. Complicated how? Daniel has always had trouble committing to one relationship. In college, he often dated multiple women at the same time, none of whom knew about the others. Michael looked uncomfortable but continued. When he met Amara, I thought he'd finally settled down. He seemed genuinely in love with her. But then, about 3 years ago, he mentioned Jessica during a guy's trip. The way he talked about her, it wasn't casual. And you didn't think to warn Amara? I couldn't keep the accusation from my voice. It wasn't my place, Michael defended himself. And honestly, I wasn't sure how serious it was with Jessica. Daniel compartmentalizes his life. He's very good at keeping different parts separate. Did James know about Jessica? Before Amara found out, I mean. Michael hesitated. I think so. Daniel and James have been best friends since freshman year. They don't keep secrets from each other. This confirmed what James had told me, that he had known about Daniel's infidelity long before the pregnancy complicated everything. One more question, I said. Do you think Jessica might have known about Amara? About the engagement? I don't know for sure, Michael replied. But about 6 months ago, at Daniel's birthday party, he got pretty drunk and mentioned that Jessica was getting too demanding, wanting him to make a choice. So I think she at least suspected there was someone else. I thanked Michael for his honesty and left the cafe with even more questions than I'd had before. If Jessica had known about Amara, had pressured Daniel to choose, that added another layer of motivation for her potential revenge. My next step was harder. I needed to speak with Daniel again, this time armed with what I now knew. I called rather than showing up unannounced, and to my surprise, he agreed to meet me at a neutral location, a park near his apartment. We sat on a bench overlooking a small lake, keeping a careful distance between us. Daniel looked better than he had during my last visit, still tired but more put together, less obviously devastated. Thank you for meeting me, I began. I know this isn't easy. What do you want, Mrs. Okafor? His voice wasn't unfriendly, just direct. I decided to be equally direct. I want to ask you about Jessica Chen. The color drained from his face, and for a moment he seemed unable to speak. Finally he said, How do you know about Jessica? That's not important. What matters is that you were involved with another woman throughout your relationship with my daughter, that you were planning to marry Amara while maintaining this other relationship. Daniel stared out at the water, his jaw clenched. It wasn't like that. Not exactly. Then tell me what it was like exactly. He was quiet for so long I thought he might refuse to answer. Then, almost reluctantly, he began to speak. I met Jessica in California during a business trip, about a year after Amara and I started dating. It was supposed to be a one-time thing, but it developed into something more. I tried to end it multiple times, but I couldn't seem to let go of either relationship. So you strung both women along for years, I said coldly. I loved them both, in different ways, Daniel insisted. With Amara, it was comfortable, familiar. She fit perfectly into my life here, into the future my parents envisioned for me. With Jessica, it was more passionate, unpredictable. She challenged me in ways Amara never did. And you thought you could have both indefinitely? He had the grace to look ashamed. I knew it couldn't last forever. When I proposed to Amara, I truly intended to end things with Jessica. But then you didn't, I finished for him. You continued seeing her, even while planning your wedding. Yes, he admitted. Until Amara found those emails. She was devastated, of course. We took a break while I supposedly sorted things out. I told her I'd end it with Jessica. And I told Jessica I needed space to deal with some family issues. More lies, I observed. Daniel nodded, his expression pained. When Amara agreed to continue with the wedding, I convinced myself it was the right choice, that I could be the husband she deserved. But then I discovered she was sleeping with James during our break, and everything fell apart. "So you exposed them at the altar, in front of everyone we know," I said, still unable to forgive that public humiliation, regardless of the circumstances. "I'm not proud of that," Daniel said quietly. I was hurt, angry. Finding those texts the morning of the wedding, I wasn't thinking clearly. "But you have to admit, Mrs. Okafor, what they did was wrong too. James was my best friend. He betrayed me just as much as Amara did." I couldn't argue with that. All three of them had made terrible choices, hurt each other deeply, created this tangled mess of betrayal and lies. "Did Jessica know about the wedding?" I asked. Daniel's expression darkened. "Yes. I told her it was over between us about a month before the ceremony. She didn't take it well. She threatened to come to Atlanta to tell Amara everything. But she didn't. No, I convinced her it would only cause pain for everyone involved. I promised to visit her after the honeymoon, to explain in person why we couldn't be together anymore." "Another lie," I pointed out. He didn't deny it. "I was drowning in lies by that point, Mrs. Okafor. I couldn't keep track of them all." "And now? Have you spoken to Jessica since the wedding?" Daniel looked away. "She called me the day after. Someone had sent her a video of what happened at the church. It went viral in certain circles, you know. I've never heard her so angry. She called me every name in the book, said I'd ruined her life, wasted years of her time." "Do you think she might have filed a complaint against Amara with the nursing board? As revenge?" He considered this. "It's possible. Jessica can be vindictive when she's hurt, but she's also smart, successful. I'm not sure she'd risk her own reputation by doing something like that." I wasn't so certain. People in pain often acted irrationally, did things they later regretted. "One last question," I said. "If the wedding had gone ahead as planned, would you have truly ended things with Jessica? Or would you have continued seeing her, cheating on my daughter throughout your marriage?" Daniel met my eyes for the first time. "I don't know, Mrs. Okafor. I'd like to think I would have done the right thing, been faithful to Amara. But given my track record..." He shrugged, a gesture of painful self-awareness. Maybe Amara and I were both saved from an even worse heartbreak down the line. As I walked away from that conversation, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Anger at Daniel for his deception, for the years he'd spent lying to my daughter. Relief that Amara had escaped a marriage to someone who couldn't be faithful. Sadness for the pain everyone was experiencing. And lingering disappointment in Amara and James for the choices they had made, even if those choices now seemed more understandable in context. The next day, I received a call from my brother Chidi. "I have information about the complaint against Amara," he said without preamble. "It wasn't Daniel, and it wasn't this Jessica woman either." "Then who?" I asked, surprised. "Mrs. Adebayo, Daniel's mother." I nearly dropped the phone. "Stella, but why would she—" "Revenge, pure and simple," Chidi interrupted. "She believes Amara deliberately humiliated her son and their family. The complaint is just the beginning. She's apparently on a mission to make Amara suffer as much as Daniel has suffered." "How do you know this?" "Her cousin works in my office." She overheard Stella bragging about it on the phone, how she was going to ensure that that girl would pay for what she did to her son. I sat down heavily, trying to absorb this new information. I need to confront her. "Esther, that might not be wise. Stella is not thinking rationally right now. She's driven by a mother's need to protect her child, to avenge the wrongs done to him. So am I retorted. Amara made mistakes, serious ones. But she doesn't deserve to lose her career, her ability to support her child. Just be careful," Chidi warned. "This situation is volatile enough already." After hanging up, I immediately called Amara to share what I'd learned. "We need to report this to the nursing board," I told her. "If Mrs. Adebayo filed a false complaint out of personal vendetta, the board should dismiss the investigation." "Will they believe me over her?" Amara asked, doubt clear in her voice. "The Adebayos are very influential in the medical community. We have to try," I insisted. "And I'm going to speak with Stella directly." "Mom, no," Amara protested. "She hates me. She'll only make things worse if you confront her." "I'm not going to confront her," I clarified. "I'm going to speak to her mother to mother. to see if we can find a way through this mess that doesn't destroy everyone's lives. Despite Amara's continued objections, I arranged to meet Stella Adebayo at a small tea house the following afternoon. I arrived early, selecting a quiet corner where our conversation wouldn't be overheard. Stella entered precisely on time, immaculately dressed as always, her face a mask of cold dignity. She didn't offer a greeting as she sat across from me, merely a slight nod of acknowledgement. "Thank you for coming," I began. "I was curious about what you could possibly have to say to me," she replied, "after what your daughter did to my son." I took a deep breath, reminding myself to remain calm. "Stella, I know about the complaint you filed against Amara with the nursing board." She didn't deny it. "She deserves consequences for her actions. Destroying her career won't undo what happened. It will only cause more pain, not just for Amara, but for her unborn child. Your son's best friend's child. A child that should have been my grandchild," Stella said bitterly. "Do you know how many people have called to express their sympathy over what happened? How many pitying looks I've received? Your daughter made my son a laughingstock." "I understand your anger," I said carefully. "But I also know things about the situation that you may not be aware of. Things that might change your perspective. Nothing could excuse what she did. What if I told you that Daniel was unfaithful to Amara throughout their relationship? That he maintained a serious relationship with another woman for years, right up until the wedding?" Stella's expression flickered briefly before hardening again. "I don't believe you. It's true. Her name is Jessica Chen. She lives in San Francisco. Daniel visited her regularly during his business trips. He told her he would end things with Amara, then told Amara he would end things with Jessica. He lied to them both." "Even if that were true," Stella said, though doubt had crept into her voice, "it doesn't justify Amara sleeping with Daniel's best friend." "No, it doesn't," I agreed. "What Amara and James did was wrong. I'm not excusing their behavior. But this situation isn't as black and white as it appeared at the wedding. All three of them made terrible choices that hurt each other deeply." Stella was quiet for a moment, absorbing my words. "Have you spoken with Daniel about this? Has he confirmed this other relationship?" "Yes, he admitted everything. He loved both women and couldn't bring himself to let either one go." She closed her eyes briefly, a flash of maternal pain crossing her face. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm asking you, mother to mother, to withdraw the complaint against Amara. Let her keep her nursing career. Let her provide for her child. Enough lives have been damaged already." Stella studied me, her expression unreadable. "And if I refuse? Then we'll fight it. We'll present evidence of your personal vendetta, of Daniel's infidelity, of the complex circumstances surrounding the wedding cancellation. It will be messy, public, and painful for everyone involved, including your son, who would be forced to admit his own deceptions under oath." It was a bluff, partly. I wasn't certain we could successfully fight the complaint, but Stella didn't know that. "You would do that?" she asked. "Expose your own daughter's shame even further? To protect her career, her future?" "Yes," I leaned forward. "Stella, we were almost family. We planned that wedding together, shared hopes for our children's happiness. Can't we find a way through this that doesn't involve destroying each other?" She was silent for a long time, staring into her untouched teacup. When she finally looked up, I saw the conflict in her eyes. "I raised my son to be an honorable man," she said quietly. "To be faithful, to keep his promises. If what you're saying is true, if Daniel truly maintained this double life." She shook her head, as if trying to reconcile this new information with her image of her son. "We all want to believe the best of our children," I said gently. "But they're human, flawed like the rest of us. Daniel, Amara, James, they all made serious mistakes." Stella straightened her shoulders. "I will need to speak with Daniel about this Jessica woman, to hear the truth from him directly. Of course, if, and I stress if, what you've told me is accurate, I will reconsider my position regarding the nursing board complaint." It wasn't a firm commitment, but it was progress. "Thank you, Stella. That's all I'm asking. For you to consider the full picture before pursuing actions that could have permanent consequences." As I stood to leave, Stella said, "Esther, regardless of the circumstances, our families will never be close again. Too much damage has been done. I understand. And I did. Some bridges, once burned, couldn't be rebuilt. But perhaps we can avoid causing any more harm. I left the tea house feeling cautiously optimistic. If Stella withdrew her complaint, Amara's professional future would be secure. She could focus on preparing for the baby, on building a new life with James, if that was what she truly wanted. That evening, I invited Amara and James to dinner at my house. It was the first time I had explicitly included James in a family meal since the wedding disaster, a small gesture of acceptance that wasn't lost on either of them. Thank you for cooking. Mom, Amara said as we sat down to a meal of jollof rice, roasted chicken, and plantains, comfort food from our Nigerian heritage. It smells amazing. I've missed your cooking, Mrs. Okafor, James added cautiously. Sunday dinners were always the highlight of my week. I nodded, acknowledging the comment without fully embracing it. I met with Stella Adebayo today, I said, getting straight to the point. Amara nearly choked on her water. You what? Mom, I told you not to confront her. It wasn't a confrontation, I clarified. It was a conversation. Mother to mother. What did she say? James asked, concern evident in his voice. She didn't deny filing the complaint. But after I told her about Daniel's relationship with Jessica, she agreed to reconsider her position. You told her about Jessica? Amara looked horrified. That will destroy Daniel's relationship with his mother. Her concern for Daniel, despite everything that had happened, touched me. Amara, she needed to understand the complete picture, that all three of you made mistakes, not just you and James. Did she believe you? James asked. She wants to confirm it with Daniel, but I think she did, on some level. No mother wants to believe her child is capable of such deception, but she seemed to recognize the possibility. Amara pushed her food around her plate, appetite seemingly gone. I never wanted any of this to happen. I never wanted to hurt Daniel, or you, or anyone. I know, sweetheart. I reached across the table and took her hand, but sometimes our choices have consequences we couldn't foresee. The important thing now is how we move forward. And how do we do that? She asked, her voice small. One day at a time, I said simply. We focus on preparing for this baby, on healing the wounds that can be healed, on rebuilding what's been broken, where possible. James cleared his throat. Mrs. Okafor, I want you to know how much it means to me, to us, that you're trying to help, despite how disappointed you must be in both of us. You're carrying my grandchild, I said, looking pointedly at Amara's growing bump. Whatever my feelings about how this situation came to be, that child is innocent, and deserves a family that functions as well as possible, given the circumstances. It wasn't full forgiveness, not yet, but it was a step toward acceptance, toward a new normal that none of us had anticipated, but that we would have to navigate together. The next morning, I received a text message from Stella. I spoke with Daniel. He confirmed everything. The complaint will be withdrawn by end of day. I forwarded the message to Amara, who called me immediately, crying with relief. Mom, I can't believe you did this for me. After everything, you're my daughter, I said simply. I will always fight for you, even when I'm angry with you. I don't deserve you, she whispered. Perhaps not, I agreed, the words softened by my tone. But you have me nonetheless. True to her word, Stella withdrew the complaint. Amara received official notification a week later that the investigation had been closed, her license secure. One crisis averted, though many challenges still lay ahead. As news of Daniel's double life spread through our community, inevitable, given the number of people involved in the various conversations, the narrative began to shift. Amara and James were still viewed as having behaved inappropriately, but Daniel's actions cast their decisions in a different light. The scandal slowly lost its singular focus, the blame distributed more evenly among all parties involved. But just as things seemed to be settling down, a new complication arose. Jessica Chen, the woman I had only known through stories and screenshots, arrived in Atlanta. I was at work when Amara called, her voice tight with panic. Mom, she's here, at my apartment, demanding to speak with me. Jessica, how did she find your address? I don't know. James isn't here. He's at a job site across town. I don't know what to do. Don't open the door, I instructed firmly. Call the police if she won't leave. I'm on my way. I left work immediately, driving well above the speed limit to reach Amara's apartment. When I arrived, I found two women facing off in the parking lot, my daughter, arms protectively crossed over her baby bump, and a petite Asian woman whose elegant appearance belied the fury evident in her stance. You ruined everything, Jessica was shouting as I approached. 5 years I gave him, 5 years of believing his promises that we would be together. I didn't know about you until a few months ago. Amara responded, her voice shaking but determined. He lied to me too, Jessica. For years. But you're the one he chose in the end. You're the one he proposed to. I stepped between them, protective instinct overriding any hesitation. That's enough. My daughter is pregnant and doesn't need this kind of stress. Jessica turned her anger toward me. And you must be the mother. Did you know your daughter was sleeping with her fiancé's best friend while planning their wedding? I know the entire situation, I said calmly, including how Daniel maintained relationships with both of you for years, lying to you both. None of you are blameless in this mess. Ms. Chen, not Daniel, not Amara and James, and not you for continuing a relationship with a man you knew was committed elsewhere. My words seemed to catch her off guard. She had come expecting to confront a villain in her story, only to be reminded of the complex reality. I loved him, she said, her voice breaking slightly. I believed him every time he said he would end it with her, that we would finally be together. And I believed him when he said he had ended things with you. Amara replied softly. We were both fooled, Jessica. He played us against each other for years. Jessica looked at Amara's pregnant belly, reality seemingly sinking in, and now you're having a baby with his best friend. Was that your revenge? To hurt him as much as possible? It wasn't planned, Amara admitted. It just happened. During a time when I believed Daniel and I were taking a break, when I knew he had been unfaithful. I watched as Jessica's righteous anger began to deflate, replaced by the sadness and confusion that came with accepting hard truths. I came all the way from California to confront you, she said, almost to herself. I've been so angry, so hurt, blaming you for everything that went wrong. I understand, Amara said. I blamed you too when I first found out. It was easier than accepting that the man I loved had betrayed me so completely. The two women looked at each other, united in their shared experience of Daniel's deception. It was a strange moment, these former rivals recognizing each other's pain, their common ground. Would you like to come inside? Amara offered tentatively. We could talk more. I think we both have pieces of the puzzle the other is missing. Jessica hesitated, then nodded. I'd like that. I watched as they walked into the apartment building together, marveling at how quickly situations could change, how enemies could become allies through shared understanding. I followed at a distance, giving them space but staying close enough to intervene if needed. Over the next 2 hours, in Amara's living room, the two women compared stories, filled in gaps, and came to terms with the full extent of Daniel's duplicity. Jessica showed Amara texts and emails spanning years, promises of a future together interspersed with excuses for why he couldn't leave his family obligation in Atlanta just yet. Amara, in turn, shared her own evidence, the timeline of her relationship with Daniel, the engagement, the wedding planning, all occurring while he maintained his connection with Jessica. He told me your relationship was arranged by your families, Jessica revealed. That it was a cultural expectation he couldn't break without causing a huge scandal in your Nigerian community. Amara laughed bitterly. He told me your relationship was purely professional, that you were a valuable business contact he couldn't afford to alienate. As I listened to their conversation, I felt a growing anger toward Daniel. The depth of his manipulation, the calculated way he had played these women against each other, was beyond anything I had imagined. This wasn't just a man who couldn't choose between two women he loved. This was someone who had created elaborate fictions to maintain control over both relationships, who had gaslighted and manipulated to serve his own desires. I'm sorry I came here like this, Jessica said eventually. I was so consumed by anger I just needed someone to blame. Daniel wouldn't take my calls after the wedding disaster, and I felt like I had wasted years of my life on a lie. I understand, Amara assured her, and I'm sorry too for the part I played in all of this. Not that I knew about you, but I should have ended things with Daniel cleanly before turning to James. I handled everything badly. Jessica glanced at me. Your mother seems like a strong woman. I bet she's been your rock through all this. Amara smiled slightly, looking in my direction. She has, even when she was disappointed in me. I'm lucky to have her. The compliment warmed me, despite everything. It was true. I had tried to be there for my daughter through this mess, to help her navigate the consequences of her choices, while holding her accountable for them. What will you do now? I asked Jessica. Will you go back to San Francisco? She nodded. My life is there, my job, my friends. I just needed closure, I guess, to see for myself the woman Daniel chose over me, to understand why. He didn't choose me in the end, Amara pointed out gently. He exposed our wedding as a sham in front of everyone we know. Because you were pregnant with his friend's baby, Jessica countered. Yes, but even before that, our relationship was broken. He was still seeing you, still lying to both of us. It would have ended eventually, one way or another. Jessica absorbed this, then stood up. I should go. Thank you for talking with me, for helping me see the bigger picture. As she was leaving, she turned back. For what it's worth, I didn't file any complaint against you with the nursing board. I was angry, but not that vindictive. I know, Amara said. We figured out who did. After Jessica left, Amara collapsed onto the sofa, emotionally drained. That was intense. You handled it well, I told her, proud of her maturity in a difficult situation. Do you think she'll be okay? The question touched me, that Amara, despite everything, could still worry about the well-being of her former rival. I think so. She seems like a strong person, and now she has the truth, which is what she came for. The truth, Amara echoed. It's all so messy, isn't it? Everyone thinking they're the hero of their own story, when really we're all just flawed people making mistakes, hurting each other without meaning to. That's wisdom, daughter, I said softly, the kind that only comes through painful experience. James arrived shortly after, having received Amara's text about Jessica's surprise visit. He listened in amazement as Amara recounted their conversation, the revelations about Daniel's elaborate deceptions. I knew he was seeing her, James admitted, but I had no idea how deep it went, how many lies he was telling both of you. I thought it was more casual, an affair he would eventually end. Is that why you never told me? Amara asked, hurt evident in her voice. All those years, you knew he was being unfaithful, and you said nothing. James looked ashamed. He was my oldest friend, Amara. I tried to convince him to come clean, to choose one of you, but I didn't feel it was my place to expose him. He paused. Obviously, I regret that now. If I had told you sooner about Jessica, maybe none of this would have happened the way it did. Or maybe it would have happened exactly the same way, I suggested. We can't rewrite the past by imagining different choices. We can only move forward from where we are now. As we sat there, my daughter, her new partner, and me, I felt an unexpected sense of peace. Not because the situation was resolved, or because all wounds were healed, but because the truth was finally out in the open. No more secrets, no more lies, no more hidden agendas. Just 3 people trying to build something new from the ashes of what had been destroyed. For the next 2 months, life settled into a new routine. Amara moved in with James, a decision I supported despite my lingering reservations about their relationship. The baby was due in 4 months, and they needed time to establish their home together before the arrival. I visited weekly for dinner, gradually warming to James as I watched how tenderly he cared for my daughter, how excited he was about becoming a father. The betrayal that had brought them together would always cast a shadow. But I could see that their love was genuine, their commitment to each other, and their child sincere. The scandal in our community had largely died down, replaced by newer gossip, different dramas. Occasionally I would encounter someone who hadn't heard about the wedding disaster, who would innocently ask how Daniel and Amara were doing. But these incidents became rarer as time passed. Then came the medical emergency that changed everything once again. I was at work when I received the call from James, his voice tight with panic. Mrs. Okafor, Amara's bleeding. The doctor said to get her to the hospital immediately. We're on our way to Atlanta Memorial. My heart seemed to stop. I'll meet you there, I managed to say, before hanging up and rushing to my supervisor to explain the situation. By the time I arrived at the emergency room, Amara had already been taken to an examination room. James sat in the waiting area, his face ashen, hands trembling slightly. What happened? I demanded. I don't know, he said helplessly. She was fine this morning when I left for work. Then she called me around noon, crying, saying something was wrong, that she was bleeding and in pain. I rushed home and brought her straight here. A doctor emerged from the hallway, looking for family members. Are you here for Amara Okafor? Yes, I said quickly. I'm her mother and this is her partner, the baby's father. How is she? How's the baby? The doctor's expression was grave. Amara is stable, but she's experiencing a placental abruption. The placenta has partially separated from the uterine wall. It's causing the bleeding and putting both her and the baby at risk. What does that mean? James asked, his voice breaking. Will they be okay? We're monitoring them closely. Amara is 22 weeks along, which means the baby is still very premature. Our goal is to stabilize the situation, to prevent further separation of the placenta, and to keep the pregnancy going as long as possible. And if that's not possible? I asked, medical training allowing me to read between the lines. The doctor met my gaze directly. If the separation worsens, or if Amara's condition becomes critical, we may need to deliver the baby immediately. At 22 weeks, the chances of survival would be very low. James made a sound like he'd been punched. I reached for his hand instinctively, our past conflicts forgotten in the face of this shared fear. Can we see her? I asked, briefly. She needs to remain calm and still. No stress. We followed the doctor to Amara's room, where my daughter lay pale against the white hospital sheets, monitors beeping steadily around her. An IV drip fed medication into her arm, and a fetal monitor tracked the baby's heartbeat. Mom, she whispered when she saw me, tears filling her eyes. James, I'm so scared. We're here, baby, I said, moving to her side and taking her hand. The doctors are taking good care of you and the little one. James went to her other side, gently touching her face. Everything's going to be okay, Amara. You're both fighters. What if we lose the baby? She asked, voice breaking. What if I can't carry to term? Don't think about that now, I advised, though the same fear gripped my own heart. Just focus on staying calm, on giving the medications time to work. We stayed with her until the doctor insisted we leave so Amara could rest. In the hallway outside her room, James finally broke down, tears streaming down his face. I can't lose them, he said, his voice raw. I can't lose either of them. I put my arms around him, this man I had once viewed with suspicion and resentment. We won't, I promised, hoping it wasn't a lie. We have to believe they'll both be okay. For the next 48 hours, we barely left the hospital. I called in to work, explaining the family emergency. James canceled meetings and delegated projects. We took turns sitting with Amara, talking to her, reading to her, doing everything possible to keep her spirits up, while the medical team worked to stabilize her condition. On the third day, as I was getting coffee in the hospital cafeteria, I looked up to see Daniel standing hesitantly at the entrance. He spotted me and approached, his expression a mixture of concern and uncertainty. Mrs. Okafor, he greeted me. I heard about Amara. Are they okay? I was too exhausted for anger or recrimination. The situation is still critical. The doctors are doing everything they can. He nodded, awkwardly shifting his weight. I know I'm probably the last person you want to see right now. But when I heard, how did you hear? I asked, curious despite everything. My mother told me. Apparently one of her friends is a nurse here. Of course, the Nigerian community's grapevine was efficient as ever, even in crisis. Would it be all right if I saw her? Just for a moment? Daniel asked. I know things ended badly between us, but I still care about her. I never wished her any harm. I considered his request. Amara needed calm, positivity. Would seeing Daniel upset her? Or might it provide some closure, some peace at a time when she needed it most? Let me ask her, I decided. If she wants to see you, I won't stand in the way. But if she doesn't, you need to respect that. Of course, he agreed quickly. I just want her to know that I'm thinking of her, praying for her and the baby. I nodded and returned to Amara's room, where James was sitting beside her bed, holding her hand as she dozed fitfully. "James," I said quietly, "could I speak with you in the hallway for a moment?" He followed me out, concern evident on his tired face. "Is everything okay?" "Daniel is here," I told him. "He heard about Amara's condition and wants to see her." James's expression hardened. "Absolutely not. She needs rest, not more stress." "I agree that she needs rest," I said carefully, "but I think we should ask Amara what she wants. This is her decision." "Mrs. Okafor, with all due respect, I don't think—" "James," I interrupted gently, "I understand your protective instinct, but Amara is an adult, and this is a complex situation with a lot of history. If seeing Daniel, making peace with him, would ease her mind right now, we should consider it." He struggled visibly with this, then finally nodded. "You're right. We should ask her." When Amara woke, we explained the situation. To my surprise, she immediately said, "Yes, I want to see him." "Are you sure?" James asked, clearly uncomfortable. "After everything that's happened?" Amara took his hand. "James, I love you. You're the father of my baby, the man I want to build a life with. But Daniel was part of my life for 5 years. If he's here, offering support when I'm scared I might lose our child, I want to see him." James looked hurt but nodded. "If that's what you want." I went to the cafeteria and brought Daniel back to Amara's room. He entered tentatively, his eyes widening slightly at the sight of Amara in the hospital bed, monitors beeping around her. "Amara," he said softly, "I'm so sorry about what's happening." She gave him a weak smile. "Thank you for coming, Daniel. It means a lot." James stood stiffly by the window, watching their interaction with guarded eyes. I positioned myself near the door, ready to intervene if the conversation became too stressful for Amara. "How are you feeling?" Daniel asked, remaining at the foot of the bed, respecting the physical and emotional distance between them. "Scared," she admitted. "The doctors say there's a chance that I might lose the baby." Daniel's expression softened with genuine concern. "I'm praying that doesn't happen, that both of you come through this healthy and strong." Tears filled Amara's eyes. "Even after everything? After how things ended between us?" "Amara," Daniel said seriously, "what happened between us? All the hurt, the betrayal on both sides. None of that matters now. I would never wish this kind of pain on you, on any child." James moved closer to the bed, protectively taking Amara's hand. Daniel noticed the gesture and nodded slightly, acknowledging James's place in her life now. "James," Daniel said, addressing his former best friend directly for the first time, "I know we may never repair what was broken between us, but I hope you know that I want the best for both of you, for your child." James's jaw tightened, but he managed a curt nod. "Thank you." The tension in the room was palpable, years of complicated history hanging in the air between these three people whose lives had become so painfully intertwined. But there was something else, too. A tentative reaching toward understanding, toward the possibility of healing. "I won't stay long," Daniel said, turning back to Amara. "You need your rest, but if there's anything you need, anything at all, please don't hesitate to ask." "Actually," Amara said hesitantly, "there is something. Would you pray with us, like we used to?" The request surprised everyone in the room, including me. Though both Daniel and Amara had been raised in religious households, I hadn't realized that prayer had been a significant part of their relationship. Daniel looked to James, silently asking permission. After a moment's hesitation, James nodded. Daniel moved to the side of the bed opposite James and bowed his head. "Heavenly Father," he began softly, "we come before you today with heavy hearts but unwavering faith. We ask for your healing touch upon Amara and her unborn child." As he continued to pray, I watched the three of them, Daniel with his head bowed, Amara with tears streaming down her face, and James standing awkwardly but respectfully participating. It was a surreal tableau. These former friends and lovers united momentarily by concern for the innocent life hanging in the balance. When Daniel finished, Amara whispered, "Thank you. I should go," he said, stepping back. "But I'll keep praying for you both, As he turned to leave, James suddenly spoke. "Daniel." Daniel paused, looking back questioningly. "Thank you for coming," James said stiffly. It means a lot to Amara. It was a small gesture, but significant, the first tentative step toward civility, if not forgiveness. After Daniel left, Amara fell asleep, emotionally exhausted by the encounter. James and I stepped into the hallway to talk. "I still hate what he did to her," James said quietly. "The years of lies, the double life with Jessica." But seeing him here, genuinely concerned, he shook his head. "It's complicated. Life usually is," I replied, "especially when it involves people we've loved." "Do you think Amara still has feelings for him?" The question seemed to cost him something to ask. "No," I said firmly. "She loves you, James. She's building a future with you. But Daniel was part of her life for a long time. Making peace with him, especially now when she's facing something so frightening, is natural." He nodded, seeming relieved. "I just want her and the baby to be okay. Nothing else matters right now." On that, we completely agree. The next morning brought cautiously good news. The bleeding had stopped, and the fetal monitor showed a strong, steady heartbeat. The doctor explained that Amara would need to remain in the hospital for at least another week, followed by strict bed rest at home for the remainder of her pregnancy. "The goal is to get to at least 28 weeks, she explained. "Every day the baby stays in utero increases the chances of a healthy outcome." "Whatever it takes," Amara said determinedly, her hand resting on her belly. "I'll do anything to protect this baby." As the immediate crisis receded, I found myself reflecting on the events of the past few months. The wedding disaster, the revelations about Daniel's double life, the tentative rebuilding of my relationship with Amara and James, and now this medical emergency that had put everything in perspective. Sometimes it takes a crisis to clarify what truly matters. The shame I had felt about the scandal, the anger at my daughter's choices, the judgment from our community, all of it paled in comparison to the fear of losing Amara or her baby. In the face of that possibility, everything else seemed trivial, inconsequential. As I watched James tenderly caring for Amara, bringing her ice chips, adjusting her pillows, talking softly to the baby through her belly, I felt a growing acceptance of their relationship. Whatever its beginnings, their love was real. Their commitment to each other and their child was genuine, and perhaps that was enough. Not the perfect story I had imagined for my daughter, but a love story nonetheless, complex and flawed and human. 6 days later, Amara was discharged from the hospital with strict instructions for bed rest and regular monitoring. James had converted their living room into a comfortable bedroom, so Amara wouldn't have to navigate stairs. He had taken leave from work to care for her, and I had rearranged my schedule to be there when he needed to step out for errands or meetings. One afternoon, as I was sitting with Amara while James went grocery shopping, she reached for my hand. "Mom," she said seriously, "I need to ask you something." "Anything?" "Sweetheart, if something happens to me, Amara—" "Don't talk like that," I interrupted, fear clutching at my heart. "Please, Mom, I need to say this." She took a deep breath. "If something happens to me during delivery, I want you to promise you'll help James with the baby. That you won't let your feelings about how we got together keep you from being there for my child." Tears filled my eyes. "Amara, nothing is going to happen to you." "You don't know that," she insisted. "The doctors have been clear about the risks. I just need to know that my baby will have both you and James if the worst happens." I squeezed her hand. "I promise, Amara, nothing would keep me from being there for your child. For James. But you're going to be fine. You're strong, like your father. You'll get through this." She relaxed slightly, comforted by my words. "I've been thinking a lot about Dad lately. About what he would think of everything that's happened. Thomas had been gone for 12 years, but his presence still loomed large in our lives, especially in moments of crisis or celebration. He would have been disappointed by the choices you made," I said honestly, "but he would have forgiven you, loved you through it, and he would have been so excited about becoming a grandfather." Amara smiled through her tears. "I wish he was here. I wish he could meet his grandchild." "He will, in a way," I said softly. "Through you, through the stories we'll tell. Your father's spirit lives on in our family, in the love we share. We sat in companionable silence for a while, each lost in our own thoughts until Amara said, "I've been thinking about names for the baby." "Oh?" I perked up, grateful for the lighter subject. "What are you considering?" "If it's a boy, Thomas, after Dad, and if it's a girl—" She hesitated. "If it's a girl, we're thinking Esther after you." Emotion welled up in me. Pride, love, gratitude. "Amara, I would be honored. But are you sure? There are so many beautiful names to choose from." "I'm sure," she said firmly. "This past year has shown me what true strength looks like, Mom. How you've stood by me despite your disappointment. How you fought for me even when you were angry with me. I want my daughter, if I have one, to have that same strength, that same capacity for forgiveness and love." I hugged her carefully, mindful of her delicate condition. "You have that strength too. Amara, you've faced so much: public humiliation, health scares, uncertain future, and you've handled it all with grace and courage. I learned from the best," she said with a small smile. When James returned from shopping, he found us looking through old family photo albums, laughing over pictures of Amara as a chubby-cheeked baby. "This will be you soon," I told him, showing him a photo of Thomas pacing the hospital room, a newborn Amara screaming in his arms, his face a mixture of terror and adoration. James smiled, a hint of nervousness in his eyes. "I can't wait. And I'm terrified at the same time." "Is that normal?" "Completely normal," I assured him. "No one is ever really prepared for parenthood, no matter how many books they read or classes they take. You learn as you go, and you love them fiercely through all the mistakes and victories. We want you to be as involved as you want to be," James said suddenly, "not just during the pregnancy, but after the baby comes. We were thinking, hoping, that you might consider moving in with us for the first few months, to help, to be there." The offer touched me deeply. "Are you sure? That's a lot of togetherness for a new family." "We're sure," Amara affirmed. "We want our child to know you, to have you in their daily life. And selfishly, we could use the help, the guidance." I thought of my own mother, who had stayed with Thomas and me for 6 months after Amara was born. How valuable her wisdom had been, how comforting her presence during those early, overwhelming days of parenthood. "I would love that," I said honestly. "Thank you for wanting me there." As the weeks passed, Amara's condition remained stable. The baby continued to grow, reaching milestones that made each day a small victory. 24 weeks, 26, 28. Each week increased the chances of a healthy delivery, reduced the risks of complications. Our community, which had been so quick to judge during the scandal, now rallied around us. Women from our church brought meals, offered prayers, volunteered to help with household tasks. Friends called regularly to check on Amara's progress. Even Stella Adebayo sent a beautiful handmade baby blanket, a peace offering that moved Amara to tears. At 32 weeks, the doctor cautiously declared that the worst was likely behind us. "The baby is developing well, and the placenta is stable. We'll continue to monitor closely, but I'm optimistic that we can get to at least 36 weeks before delivery." The relief was profound, like emerging from a long, dark tunnel into sunlight. For the first time since the hospital emergency, we allowed ourselves to fully embrace the joy of anticipation, to plan for the future with hope rather than fear. James and I painted the nursery a soft yellow. Amara directing from her position on a comfortable chair, we moved into the room. We assembled furniture, washed and folded tiny clothes, discussed childcare arrangements for when Amara eventually returned to work. "I never thought I'd be this happy again," Amara confessed one evening as we sat together folding baby clothes. "After everything that happened at the wedding, the scandal, I thought my life was over, that I'd ruined everything beyond repair." I smoothed a tiny onesie, marveling at how small it was. Life is more resilient than we give it credit for. Hearts heal. New beginnings emerge from endings. "I couldn't have gotten through any of this without you, Mom," she said, her eyes shining with tears. "The way you fought for me with the nursing board. How you've been here through this pregnancy scare. Even when you were disappointed in me, you never abandoned me." "That's what mothers do," I said simply. "We love our children through their mistakes, their triumphs, everything in between. It's not always easy, but it's always necessary. James came in with cups of herbal tea, having overheard our conversation. "Your mom's pretty amazing," he told Amara, handing me a cup with obvious affection. "I hope our child inherits her strength, her integrity." The compliment touched me deeply. James and I had come a long way from the tense, suspicious relationship we'd had after the wedding disaster. Gradually, through crisis and everyday moments, we had built a foundation of mutual respect, even something approaching love. "Speaking of our child," Amara said, excitement in her voice, "the doctor said we might be able to schedule the C-section for next week, at 36 weeks. She thinks the baby's lungs are developed enough now." The planned C-section had been decided weeks ago, a precaution given Amara's placental issues. Though not ideal, it was the safest option for both mother and child. "That's wonderful news," I said, feeling a flutter of anticipation. "I'll make sure everything is ready here. The nursery, the supplies, everything you'll need when you come home with the baby." "We also wanted to ask you something," James said, glancing at Amara. "We'd like you to be in the delivery room with us, if you're comfortable with that." "Really?" I asked, surprised and moved. "I assumed you'd want that time to yourselves." "Mom, you're the most important person in my life besides James," Amara said. "I want you there when your grandchild enters the world. I need you there." Tears pricked my eyes. "Then I'll be there." Every step of the way. The next week passed in a flurry of final preparations. The C-section was scheduled for Tuesday morning. On Monday night, as I helped Amara pack her hospital bag, she suddenly grew quiet. "What is it, sweetheart?" I asked, noticing her distant expression. "I was just thinking about how different this is from what I had imagined." She placed a hand on her rounded belly. "I always thought when I had my first child it would be with Daniel. That our families would be celebrating together. That everything would be perfect. Life rarely gives us exactly what we plan," I said gently. "But sometimes what we get instead can be just as beautiful, in a different way." "Do you really believe that?" she asked, searching my face. "That this family we're creating, me, James, the baby, you, that it's as good as what would have been?" "I believe that love is what makes a family, not perfectly executed plans," I told her honestly. "And there is so much love here, Amara. For this child, for each other. That's what matters." She nodded, seemingly satisfied with my answer. "I want to do better than I've done, Mom. Be more honest, more brave. I want my child to be proud of me." "They will be," I assured her. "We all make mistakes, Amara. It's how we recover from them, what we learn, that defines us." The next morning, we arrived at the hospital before dawn. James was a nervous wreck, checking and rechecking that they had everything they needed, asking the nurses repetitive questions, hovering anxiously over Amara. "James," I finally said, placing a calming hand on his arm. "Everything is going to be fine. The medical team knows exactly what they're doing." He exhaled shakily. "I know, this is the most important day of my life. I can't believe it's finally happening." "Go get some coffee," I suggested. "Take a few minutes to collect yourself. Amara and I will be right here." After he left, Amara squeezed my hand gratefully. "Thank you. He's been like this for days, so anxious. I love him for caring so much, but it's making me more nervous." "That's what I'm here for," I said with a smile. "To manage both of you through this." The hours leading up to the surgery passed in a blur of preparations. Consent forms, IV insertions, meetings with the anesthesiologist and surgeon. Before we knew it, it was time. Amara was wheeled into the operating room, James and I following in surgical gowns and caps. The procedure itself was remarkably quick. One moment, the surgeon was making the incision. The next, there was a cry, strong, indignant, beautiful, as my grandchild entered the world. "It's a girl," the doctor announced, holding up the squirming, red-faced miracle. James began to cry, overcome with emotion. Amara, though partially sedated, reached out her arms. "Let me see her. Let me hold my daughter." The nurse brought the baby to her, placing the tiny bundle against Amara's chest. "She's perfect," Amara whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, look. She's absolutely perfect." I moved closer, my heart swelling with love, as I gazed at my granddaughter for the first time. She had a full head of dark hair, Amara's nose, and when she briefly opened her eyes, I caught a glimpse of deep brown, just like James's. "Esther," James said, looking at me with radiant joy. "We're naming her Esther after you, Esther Diana Okafor Jenkins." The honor overwhelmed me. This child, this innocent new life, would carry my name into the future. Despite all the pain and scandal that had preceded her birth, she represented hope, renewal, the promise of better days ahead. "Welcome to the world, little Esther," I said softly, touching her tiny hand with my finger. She grasped it reflexively, her grip surprisingly strong for one so small. "You are so loved, little one. So very loved." The days following little Esther's birth were a blur of joy, exhaustion, and adjustment. Amara recovered well from the C-section, though the process was slow and sometimes painful. James proved to be a natural father, changing diapers with surprising skill, walking the floor with Esther during midnight crying sessions, supporting Amara through the challenges of breastfeeding, and I slipped easily into my role as grandmother, providing guidance when asked, stepping back when the new parents needed space to figure things out on their own. It was a delicate balance, being present without interfering, but we found our rhythm. 2 weeks after Esther's birth, as I was rocking her to sleep while Amara napped, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Daniel. "I heard the baby arrive safely. Congratulations to all. Would it be possible to speak with you sometime soon? There's something important I need to discuss." The message surprised me. I hadn't heard from Daniel since his visit to the hospital during Amara's pregnancy complication. What could he possibly want to discuss now? After putting Esther in her bassinet, I replied, "Thank you. Yes, we can meet." When and where? We arranged to meet the following day at a quiet cafe across town. I debated whether to tell Amara and James about the meeting, but decided against it. They were focused on their new baby, on building their life together. Whatever Daniel wanted to discuss, I would handle it myself. When I arrived at the cafe, Daniel was already seated at a corner table, a manila envelope in front of him. He stood politely as I approached. "Mrs. Okafor, thank you for coming," he said, gesturing for me to sit. "What's this about, Daniel?" I asked, getting straight to the point. He took a deep breath. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since everything happened. About my role in the situation. The choices I made that contributed to the pain everyone experienced. This was unexpected. The Daniel I had known, charming but somewhat self-centered, had never been particularly introspective. "Go on," I encouraged. "I've been seeing a therapist," he continued, "trying to understand why I maintained relationships with 2 women for so long, why I lied to them both, why I couldn't choose." "And have you found any answers?" "Some," he said thoughtfully. "Fear of commitment, certainly. Issues stemming from my parents' marriage, which wasn't nearly as perfect as they pretended. And a deep-seated need for validation, for feeling wanted by multiple people." I nodded, impressed by his self-awareness. "That's insightful, Daniel. It doesn't excuse what I did," he added quickly. "The hurt I caused Amara, Jessica, James, even you, but understanding it helps me make better choices moving forward." "Is that why you wanted to meet? To share your therapy insights?" "Partly," he admitted, "but also because of this." He pushed the manila envelope toward me. "It's a trust fund I've established for Esther. For her education, her future." I stared at him in shock. "A trust fund? But why? She's not your child." "No," he agreed. "But in a strange way, she exists because of choices I made. If I had been honest with Amara from the beginning, if I hadn't maintained my relationship with Jessica, things might have ended differently between us. There might never have been a reason for Amara to turn to James." "That's a generous perspective," I said carefully. "But I'm not sure Amara and James will feel comfortable accepting this." "I understand that," Daniel said. "That's why I'm giving it to you first, to decide if and when to tell them about it. The fund is irrevocable. The money is already set aside, invested conservatively. It will be there for Esther when she's ready for college, regardless of whether her parents formally accept it now." I opened the envelope and glanced at the documents inside. The trust was substantial, enough to pay for 4 years at a private university, with money left over for graduate school if she chose that path. Daniel, this is extremely generous, I said, still trying to process his motivations. But I have to ask, why do this? Why now? He looked down at his coffee cup, gathering his thoughts. When I heard about Amara's pregnancy complication, something shifted in me. All the anger, the betrayal I had been feeling. It suddenly seemed so insignificant. The possibility that she might lose the baby, that the child might suffer because of the broken relationships between all of us adults. He shook his head. It put everything in perspective. And this is your way of making amends? Not exactly, he said thoughtfully. I don't think money can make amends for emotional hurt. This is more about taking responsibility for my part in the situation, about trying to create something positive from all the pain. I studied him, trying to gauge his sincerity. The Daniel sitting across from me seemed different from the man I had known before, more thoughtful, more mature, more aware of his impact on others. What would you like me to tell Amara and James? I asked. Whatever you think is best, he said. If you believe it would only reopen old wounds to mention me, you can simply present it as an anonymous education fund. The legal structure allows for that, but if you think they're ready to hear it came from me, with no strings attached, no expectations, that would be my preference. I considered this. I'll need time to think about it, to find the right moment, the right approach. Of course, he nodded. There's no rush. The money is secure, growing for Esther's future. As I prepared to leave, Daniel said, Mrs. Okafor, one more thing. I truly am sorry for the pain my actions caused your family. The public humiliation at the wedding. That was cruel, no matter the provocation. I regret it deeply. Thank you for saying that, Daniel, I replied, genuinely touched by his apology. We all made mistakes in this situation. What matters now is learning from them, growing beyond them. Is she beautiful? He asked suddenly, a wistful note in his voice. The baby? I smiled, thinking of little Esther's perfect face. She's absolutely gorgeous. Looks just like Amara did as a newborn, but with James's eyes. Daniel nodded, a complicated mix of emotions crossing his face. I'm glad. I hope she has a wonderful life surrounded by people who love her. She will, I assured him. Of that I have no doubt. I left the cafe with the envelope, my mind swirling with thoughts about how to present this unexpected gift to Amara and James. Would they see it as a genuine gesture of goodwill? Or as an intrusion, a reminder of painful history they were trying to move beyond? In the end, I decided honesty was the best approach. That evening, after Esther had been fed and was sleeping peacefully, I sat down with Amara and James in their living room. I met with Daniel today, I began, watching their expressions carefully. He wanted to give something to Esther. James immediately tensed. What? Why is he involving himself with our daughter? Hear me out, I said gently, then explained about the trust fund, Daniel's reasoning, the no-strings-attached nature of the gift. When I finished, Amara was quiet, thoughtful. James looked skeptical. I don't know how I feel about this, he admitted. Part of me thinks we should refuse, that we can provide for Esther ourselves. But another part recognizes that this could give her opportunities we might struggle to offer. It feels strange, Amara said softly, but also right somehow, like the circle is being closed, the wounds beginning to heal. You don't have to decide immediately, I told them. The fund is established, secure. You can take time to think about it. They agreed to sleep on it, to discuss it further when they weren't so tired from newborn care. But a week later, they reached a decision. We're going to accept the trust fund, Amara told me, with conditions. We want to meet with Daniel, all three of us, you, me, and James, to thank him face to face, but also to establish boundaries, to make it clear that this doesn't give him any claim on Esther's life. That sounds reasonable, I said, proud of their maturity in handling this situation. I'll arrange it. The meeting took place at my house, neutral territory for everyone involved. Daniel arrived with a small gift, a beautiful children's book with an inscription that read simply, "May your life be filled with knowledge, adventure, and love." A friend of the family. The conversation was initially awkward, tense with unspoken history. But gradually, As they discussed the trust fund details and the boundaries Amara and James wanted to establish, the atmosphere softened. "I want to be clear," James said firmly. "We appreciate this gift for Esther. It's generous and thoughtful, but we're her parents. We make all decisions regarding her upbringing, her future." "I completely understand and respect that," Daniel assured him. "I have no intention of inserting myself into your family life. This isn't about trying to maintain a connection or claim any role in Esther's life. It's simply something I wanted to do, with no expectations attached." Amara, who had been quiet for most of the conversation, finally spoke. "Daniel, I need to ask, do you still hate us?" "For what happened?" Daniel looked surprised by the question. "No," he said after a moment's reflection. "I don't hate either of you. I was angry for a long time, hurt beyond words. But I've come to understand that what happened between us was complex, with responsibility on all sides, myself included, perhaps especially myself." "I never meant to hurt you," Amara said softly. "Neither did James. It wasn't a deliberate betrayal, though I know that's how it felt." "I know that now," Daniel acknowledged. "And I regret how I handled things at the wedding. That public humiliation, it was cruel, unnecessary." "It was," James agreed, his tone firm but not hostile. "But it's in the past now. We've all moved on, built new lives. Are you happy?" Daniel asked them both, genuine curiosity in his voice. "With each other, with your daughter?" "Yes," Amara said without hesitation, reaching for James's hand. "Happier than I ever imagined possible." "Then I'm glad," Daniel said simply. "That's all any of us can hope for in the end, isn't it? To find happiness, to create a life of meaning." As he prepared to leave, Daniel paused at the door. "Mrs. Okafor, may I ask one favor?" "What is it?" I asked cautiously. "Would you send me a photo of Esther occasionally? Not often, just, I'd like to see the child I've committed to helping educate. To know that she's thriving." I looked to Amara and James, letting them make this decision. After a silent exchange between them, Amara nodded. "We can do that," she said. "A photo now and then. Nothing more." "Thank you," Daniel said, genuine gratitude in his voice. "That's more than I deserve, and I appreciate it." After he left, the three of us sat in thoughtful silence for a moment. Then James said, "That went better than I expected." "He's changed," Amara observed. "Therapy seems to have helped him gain perspective." "People can surprise you," I said. "Sometimes in disappointing ways, but sometimes in positive ones too." As we drove back to their house, where baby Esther was being watched by my friend Nkechi, I reflected on the long, painful journey that had brought us to this point. The wedding disaster that had seemed like the end of the world at the time now felt like a necessary breaking point. The collapse of relationships built on deception that had allowed new, more honest ones to form. "You know," I said as we pulled into their driveway, "a year ago, I couldn't have imagined sitting calmly with the three of you, discussing Esther's future, the scandal, the public humiliation, the betrayals on all sides. It seemed insurmountable. But we got through it," Amara said, turning to look at me from the passenger seat. "We survived, Mom, all of us." "More than survived," James added. "We've built something new, something real, and that, I realized, was the true justice in this situation. Not punishment or revenge, not winners and losers, but healing. The painful honesty that had allowed for genuine forgiveness, the hard work of rebuilding trust, the focus on the innocent child who represented our shared future rather than our troubled past." As we entered the house and I watched James lift Esther from her bassinet, his face transforming with love, I knew that we had all, in our own ways, found redemption. Not the perfect storybook ending I had once envisioned for my daughter, but something more authentic, more hard-won, and perhaps more meaningful because of that. 6 months after Esther's birth, we gathered in the garden of Amara and James's new home, a modest but charming 3-bedroom house they had purchased with my help for the down payment. The occasion was Esther's christening, a celebration of her life and an opportunity to formally introduce her to our extended community. The garden was decorated with soft pink and white flowers, tables set with elegant but simple refreshments, a small gazebo converted into an altar for the ceremony. About 50 guests had been invited, family members, close friends, colleagues from work. A carefully curated group of people who had either supported us through the scandal or had come into our lives afterward, without knowledge of the painful history. As I helped Amara dress Esther in her christening gown, a beautiful white lace creation that had been in our family for generations, I marveled at how much my granddaughter had grown in 6 short months. She was a happy, chubby baby with Amara's smile and James's curious, intelligent eyes. She rarely cried, preferring instead to observe the world with a solemn intensity that often made people comment, "She seems so wise, like an old soul, Mom. Can you believe how much has changed in just 1 year?" Amara asked, adjusting the tiny bow in Esther's hair. "It's remarkable," I agreed. "From the lowest point in our lives to one of the highest." "Do you think people still talk about what happened at the wedding? About Daniel's announcement, the scandal?" I considered this. Some probably do. Scandals have a way of lingering in people's memories. But it matters less now, doesn't it? We've moved beyond it. "We have," she agreed, lifting Esther into her arms. "And I've learned so much. About honesty, about facing consequences, about what truly matters in life." "That's what difficulties can teach us if we let them," I said, smoothing my dress. "They can break us, or they can transform us." The ceremony itself was beautiful, simple, meaningful, focused entirely on Esther and the community that would help raise her. James's parents, who had been hesitant about the relationship initially but had fallen completely in love with their granddaughter, stood proudly as godparents. My brother Chidi read a blessing in Igbo, honoring our Nigerian heritage. Friends sang, prayed, offered their good wishes. During the reception that followed, I found myself standing alone for a moment, watching Amara and James circulate among the guests with Esther, accepting congratulations and good wishes. The joy on their faces, the obvious love between them, filled my heart with gratitude. "She's beautiful, isn't she?" a familiar voice said beside me. I turned to find Stella Adebayo standing there, elegant as always in a deep purple traditional outfit. I hadn't seen her since our confrontation about the nursing board complaint nearly a year ago. "Stella," I said, surprised. "I didn't know you were coming. Amara invited me," she explained. "I wasn't sure I would attend, but I wanted to see the baby, to wish them well." "That's very generous of you," I said carefully. She smiled slightly. "Perhaps I've gained some perspective over the past year, just as you have. Daniel told me about the trust fund he established for Esther, about his meeting with Amara and James. He seems to have found peace with the situation. I thought perhaps I should try to do the same." "I'm glad you came," I said sincerely. "It means a lot, especially to Amara. She always respected you, valued your opinion. The child looks like her," Stella observed, watching as James gently bounced Esther in his arms. "But I see him in her too. They make beautiful parents." "They do," I agreed. "They've grown so much through this experience, become more thoughtful, more intentional about the kind of life they want to build together." Stella was quiet for a moment, then said, "I apologize, Esther, for the complaint I filed, for the attempts to hurt your daughter professionally. It was wrong of me, motivated by anger rather than justice." "Thank you," I said, touched by her honesty. "That means a great deal." "Perhaps," she ventured hesitantly, "we could have tea sometime? Not as almost family, but simply as 2 women of a certain age, with experiences to share." The offer surprised me, but not unpleasantly. "I'd like that, Stella." "Very much." As she moved away to congratulate the new parents, I felt a sense of completeness, of circles closing. The healing was extending beyond our immediate family, reaching out to others who had been hurt by the situation. Later that evening, after the guests had departed and Esther had been put to bed, Amara, James, and I sat on their back porch, enjoying the peace of the summer evening. James had his arm around Amara, and she leaned against him comfortably, their bodies fitting together as if designed for each other. "Thank you both," I said suddenly, "for including me so fully in your lives, in Esther's life. It's a gift I don't take for granted." "We wouldn't have it any other way, Mom," Amara said warmly. "You're the foundation of our family, the wisdom we rely on, the strength that helped us through the darkest times. Besides," James added with a smile, You're the only one who can get Esther to sleep when she's being stubborn about her nap time. We need you for purely practical reasons." We all laughed, the sound rising into the night air, a testament to the joy we had found despite, or perhaps because of, the difficult journey we had traveled together. "I've been thinking," Amara said after a comfortable silence, "about what I want to teach Esther as she grows up. The values that are most important. What have you decided?" I asked, curious. "Honesty," she said immediately, "even when it's painful, even when it would be easier to lie or hide the truth. So much of the hurt in our situation came from deception. Daniel's double life, my relationship with James while still engaged to Daniel, all of it. Forgiveness too," James added thoughtfully. "Not the kind that ignores wrongdoing or pretends it didn't happen, but the kind that acknowledges the hurt and chooses to move forward anyway. The kind that recognizes our shared humanity, our capacity for both terrible mistakes and genuine growth. And resilience," I contributed, "the ability to face life's worst moments and not be defined by them. To rebuild, to find joy again, to create something beautiful from the ashes of what was lost." "That's a powerful legacy to give her," Amara said, her eyes shining in the dim porch light. "Not a perfect family with no mistakes, but one that knows how to recover from them, how to love through them. And she'll have examples of all those qualities in both of you," I said proudly. "You've demonstrated them throughout this entire experience." We sat together a while longer, sharing memories, making plans for the future, enjoying the simple pleasure of being together on a beautiful evening, and I thought about the long, painful journey that had brought us here. From the moment Daniel had stood up in that church and shouted those devastating words, through all the revelations and confrontations that followed, to this peaceful night celebrating the family we had become. The scandal that had seemed like the end of the world had, in fact, been the beginning of something new, something unexpected but beautiful in its own way. A testament to the human capacity for resilience, for growth, for finding light even in the darkest circumstances. As I looked at my daughter and her partner, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the porch lamp, I felt a profound sense of peace. The journey had been difficult, the pain real, the challenges substantial, but we had faced them together and emerged stronger, wiser, more compassionate. And at the center of it all was little Esther, sleeping peacefully inside, innocent and perfect, representing all our hopes for the future. A future that would undoubtedly hold its own challenges, its own difficult moments, but facing them would be a family that had already weathered a terrible storm and found its way to calmer shores. A family built not on perfect choices or untested love, but on hard-won wisdom, genuine forgiveness, and the daily commitment to choosing love over resentment, honesty over comfortable lies, hope over despair. A family I was proud to call my own. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more dramatic real-life stories. Your support means everything to me. Leave a comment below telling me what you would have done in Esther's situation and where you're reading from. Until next time, remember that even the most painful chapters of our lives can lead to beautiful new beginnings.